Welcome into the Paul Farrington Show. Paul joined by Robert Ziggy Ziegler at home in California right now. A little NFC North playoff matchup. And today we have someone who we've had a lot of people asking to join this show for quite a while now. I'm going to work on the pronunciation here because apparently no one can do it. We have Basaraski Productions, Bass for short. So, yeah, I know I butchered it.
You got it right 3 times in our pre-production, and then we go on air and you blow it.
Basaraski. That sounds about right. Basaraski Productions. We appreciate you joining us here today. It's kind of a coping day, we were saying before we started off, given the Packers streak ending against the Bears and the Vikings. I don't even know if I want to talk about that game down in Detroit yesterday. And that was just one of the worst football games of my life. But Bass, tell me right now, how are you feeling after that week 18?
Well, first off, appreciate you having me on the show. Excited to talk ball with you guys. It sucks because it's 11 straight versus the Bears. The last time the Bears beat us was 2018. And for that long stretch of time, it was almost a given that the Packers are going to beat the Bears. But I said it on my post game yesterday. Hey, it's their Super Bowl. They got their win, right? They're 5-12. Move on to your mock drafts, right? Every other NFC North team has a playoff game to look ahead to, right? The Lions just have a bye, but both us Vikings and Packers fans at least have a game to look forward to. So I'm happy for Bears fans. They got that. They got their win. The streak had to end at some time. It's a shame it ended yesterday because the Packers fandom were already doom and gloom, and now it's even worse right now, which I still don't understand. I'm sure we're going to dive down into it, but yeah. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good, even though that game yesterday was garbage.
You know, it's funny too, because you talk about like Bears fans viewing this as the Super Bowl, as basically as their Super Bowl. We had a bunch of buddies. Ziggy was saying a bunch of our Bears friends were texting us saying like, we did it. Seasons like this made up for the entire season. We're like, all right, I guess there are better things. You know, it helps despite the loss yesterday for the Vikings. I'm like, at least we're not in that position right now. It makes it a little easier.
Yeah, honestly, once that happened to us, I turned on the Lions-Vikings game and I was like, all right, this is quite nice. This is quite nice as well. I think we both had that situation yesterday where we're like, all right, our situation sucked, but okay, at least that happened, right?
Yes. And it probably made it a little easier for you guys too that the Commanders wound up winning, because there was one point where, I was even rooting for the Packers to get the 6th seed because we were kind of hoping for a Vikings-Packers NFC Championship battle on this show. I know it's kind of sacrilegious to root for the Packers at all as a Viking fan, but at one point, the Packers had the Bears deep in their own territory, and the Commanders looked like they were going to have to go on some crazy game-winning drive, and both of those things actually wound up happening. So even though you lose the game, the injuries were the bigger issue, actually, I'd say, coming out of that than losing the football game, obviously. But all right, why don't we dive into it? So right now, Bass, you lose to the Bears, you lost to the Vikings. The fan base, at least from what I'm seeing, looks like they're just kind of giving up on the season. You have some big injuries: Christian Watson, Jair Alexander, Jordan Love. I want to know, what is the pulse of Packer Nation, and then what is your beat on the Packers right now?
Yeah, man, the pulse right now is negativity. It's pessimism. And I don't understand it too much. You'd feel like the team was worse than last year, judging by what everyone's saying. And that's because there's a recency bias. Like, we just lost to the Vikings. We just got beat by a 4-12 football team. I understand that. A lot of that game yesterday was down to coaching and decisions made by Matt LaFleur. So a lot of people are thinking, does he have the capability to go and win a playoff game? A lot of people are saying no, right? But last year, the Packers were 9-8, barely snuck into the playoffs, were the first 7 seed to win a game against the Dallas Cowboys. They're actually 7-point underdogs. And the Packers are opening this game as 3.5 underdogs. And I'm sure that has to do with a lot of injuries. Jalen Hurts still not clearing concussion protocol, but it's a lot of doom and gloom right now for Packers fandom, which I'm not really on the same board as that. I've always been an optimistic fan. I've always thought, hey, until the clock hits 0, your team has a chance. And when you look at the Packers of 2024, sure, there's some games that are highly questionable and 0-5 against teams with a better record than them. I understand that. But in most of those games outside of the first Detroit game, it was all very, very close games. If you actually look at all their losses against teams with higher records than them, the average point differential from all 5 games is 4.4 points. So they're in every game. Did all those games start wonderfully? No, not a chance, right? Week 4 against Minnesota, you guys were up like 28-7. So not all those games started great, but we still kept in those games. And the Packers made a lot of mistakes in those games. I'm not saying the other teams didn't deserve the win, but the Packers did make a lot of mistakes in those games that I think if they can get out of their own damn way, they can be a pretty damn good football team. When you look at the Packers right now, statistically, they finished top 10 in points per game allowed, point differential, yards gained, yards allowed, yards gained per play, yards allowed per play, takeaways, rushing yards, and turnover differential. All top 10 stats. So people acting and sitting here like this team should not be in the playoffs, I don't agree with that. And if you want to go a step further into advanced analytics and look at DVOA, the Packers were 13th in DVOA last year. They're third this year. So people are sitting here going, oh, they can't do what they did against the Cowboys last year to the Eagles this year. They certainly can. Now, will they go and do that? Am I sitting here wearing the green color glasses?
Yeah, let's hear it.
That's going to happen. I'm going to the game. I'm from around Philly. I just bought tickets. So I better see that happen. I want to see that happen. I still have faith in this team.
Be careful there.
I've grown up here my entire life. I've done it multiple times. It's not a great thing, but I don't care. I'm still going to rep the green and gold. Clock hits 0. I'm an optimistic fan. I'm sure you guys can see that. I don't like the doom and gloom. People are saying, oh, we already lost round 1, bounce out on to next year. No, that's the Bears way. That we don't do that. We don't do mock drafts, right? We're talking about the playoffs here. And as long as we have a chance, we still have a chance. So that's where I'm at.
Dude, you need to get a we don't do mock draft shirt and start selling that. That's awesome for the Packers. Ziggy, what do you think of that take? We're trying to be more optimistic, Bass, here as Vikings fans. I guess, as a Packer fan, you kind of are born into these winning ways. And we as Vikings fans are much more like, we'll see first and goal from the 5-yard line. And I'm in the back of my room saying like, shit, we're going to get stopped here. Everyone else in the room is saying, Paul, you're on the 5. I said, come check on me in 5 minutes. And, obviously we didn't score. So it's just kind of a difference in the Vikings and Packers fandom. Ziggy, what do you think of Bass's optimism heading into this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, we ran a show a few days ago telling Packers fans to relax. And the way people are talking about this Eagles team, you'd think they're unbeatable, that the Packers have absolutely no chance in this game. I think you made a good point that the Packers have come out slow in some of these big games. Well, I'm not sure it's going to be a whole lot different for the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts, as you said, he's still in concussion protocol. He's going to get out, I'm sure. He's playing in this game. The lines are priced like he's going to play. But that means it's been several weeks since he's played football. The defense, basically all of them took the game off last week. Almost everyone on the offense was out. There's a real chance the Eagles come into this game with some rust. And while they've been very good at home, the Panthers held in very close late in December. The Eagles lost in Washington in a game they really wanted to win a few weeks ago. And I think there's a lot of reasons to think this Packers team could match up well against them. We've shown what they can do against great rushing attacks, right? They locked down Detroit. I'm not sure anybody had a better game against that Detroit running game than the Packers did the last time they played. So I think, there's a reason the Eagles are favored. The Eagles are a good team. We can't sit here and say the Packers are going to go into Philadelphia and crush them. But it's not like this is some unwinnable game for the Packers. Jordan Love, I think, will mostly be healthy. LaFleur said that he would have been able to get back in the game if they really needed him. I don't get the pessimism of the Packers are going to go in, they're going to get blown out, the season's going to be a huge failure. Like, no, you're here, you're in the playoffs, you've got a winnable game. Believe in your team a little bit.
Yeah, I like to call it, you guys are going to like this one. Whenever I hear fans doing that a lot, I call it entitled town.
Yeah.
So I say that a lot because it's, you're right. We were kind of born into it. I was born in the 90s, right? So like, I've seen a lot of great seasons. I've seen, if you call, being 1 year old, seeing a Super Bowl, I've seen 2 Super Bowls, right? So I understand that. But yeah, overall, I'm not huge on it. I'm not huge also on telling people how to fan, but I'm just giving you my understanding of what I think. And I'm always going to, be rooting until the very end, regardless. And if they have a chance, they have a chance.
Yeah. I mean, you've basically only seen good seasons, right? Unless like Aaron Rodgers is on the turf.
4-12, I think, with Favre. And then there's some others with Aaron Rodgers' broken collarbone and end of Rodgers era. But yes,
it is pretty amazing because I can think back to basically every single Vikings playoff run that I've lived through in my life. I was born in 1998. So again, I was alive for that season, but I have no memory whatsoever. It would be amazing if I did. But like the magical Viking seasons, they're burned in my brain. Like, I just think about them all the time. Then I ultimately wind up getting upset when I think about 2009 in New Orleans. But it's kind of funny for you, like you guys have so many just fantastic seasons, one after another. But going into Philly, I mean, you guys talked about Jalen Hurts, who is banged up, hasn't played for a few weeks. But Jordan Love now, this injury, Ziggy, you said he would have been able to come back into the game. Earlier in the year, we saw Jordan trying to play through injury, and he was playing through in those games, but he really kind of took off after the bye when they had the Bears game. There was that stretch from the Bears game through, I don't know, for a few weeks on, where he looked like the Jordan Love that we saw at the end of last season. And that's when you really, at least on our channel, we started to see the Packers Nation revving up again. It's like, here we go. This is what we do. November, December football. And it's was this the first year LaFleur lost in December or something? Hadn't he been like unbeaten in December?
He's very good in November, December. So probably, there's probably something to that.
But with Jordan Love being injured and Christian Watson now out for the year with the ACL injury, how much are the injuries a concern to you coming into this week?
Well, we know those guys, right? We know Christian Watson's out, Jair's out.
Yep.
The Watson thing baffles me, man. I'll touch on that before I go into the other injuries, just because, I mean, to see him go out in the field, and I know we got a little bit more from LaFleur today in his press conference that basically Christian Watson said, hey, if I practice today, saying on Friday, can you get me up? Can you let me play in this game? And LaFleur agreed to that. So it was not just the Packers saying, LaFleur, Watson, go out there. He wanted to go out there himself. But when I saw him go out there on the opening drive with a chunky knee brace on his right knee, I mean, I don't know the last time. I don't even know if I've ever seen a receiver wear that type of metal knee brace in a game that's quote unquote meaningless, right? It was so confusing to me. And I think that's exactly why he tore his ACL. And a lot of people will say Christian Watson's, made of glass. He's fragile. When you have a knee injury, because it's on his right one with the brace, he's compensating in his mind. Even if he doesn't mean to be, he's compensating. He's putting more pressure on that left leg. And at the top of the route, his knee gave out. He tore his ACL and other ligaments. That's the early report right now. That's crazy on a meaningless game. I mean, yeah, sure. You can get to the 6th seed if the Cowboys beat the Commanders, which they didn't. And you beat the Bears, which you didn't. What confused the hell out of me about it is they had Josh Jacobs in the game for 1 quarter, and it seemed like that was the plan. So if you're only going to play some of your starters for 1 quarter, I mean, Aaron Mosby outsnapped Rashawn Gary.
Yeah.
So if you're only playing these guys so much
why
in the
send
game,
them?
why even put him out there? It made no sense to me. They only had 4 other active receivers because Romeo Doubs was out with illness. A lot of confusing thing happened in that game. But back to the injuries, Jordan Love, I do think he'll be fine. It's like a nerve injury when you hit your funny bone. There's a little bit of like bruising there. Usually it's like a 3 to 4 or 5 day recovery. It's nothing massive unless you mess that up even more, which I doubt. Like I said, if it was a playoff game or the Packers, like last year, needed to win that game to get in the playoffs, he would have been back in the game 100%. Now, is there going to be any effect on that? Him not being able to practice maybe in full this week? We'll see what happens on Wednesday. I'm not too worried about Jordan Love. I was way more worried when he had the groin issue, the knee issue, where his mobility was limited. That's not the case anymore. Outside of that, I think other injuries, it comes down to getting some other guys back, such as Evan Williams at safety, Quay Walker at linebacker to pair up with Edgerrin Cooper, Romeo Doubs back from illness, right? So there's other injuries outside of Love, Watson, and Jair that are just as important.
Yeah, and it's funny when I'm thinking about the Packers and the playoff run this year. I think you're right. This is a better team than the one last year, but with the injuries, that's obviously a huge concern. And then I'm a big believer in momentum. Ziggy sometimes gets on me, but I'm a big believer in momentum in game and then week to week. And it feels different right now. Where last year you were on this run. And even going into Dallas, that was a tough game. The Dallas was the 2 seed for a reason. You're in their building. Dak was having a phenomenal year, second in MVP, but it still felt like you guys became unstoppable. And I'm having this kind of like feeling in the back of my mind here. And Ziggy, let me know what you think about this too, because we're not the Packers fans, but it seems like it would take a lot to beat Philly. I think they can, and I think the Packers ceiling is as high as anyone in the NFC. But it's starting to feel like, all right, it's gonna take some sort of tide turning here that we haven't seen over the past couple of weeks of football, and I'm not sure if it's gonna happen. Even though I want it to happen, I'd love to avoid going to Philly as a Viking fan.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the playoffs, right? It's people use this phrase, it drives me nuts. They say that's a team you don't want to face in the playoffs. You don't want to face anybody in the playoffs. It's only good teams. This isn't a year occasionally like a really bad division winner sneaks in or there's some garbage 7 seed. That's not the case this year, especially not in the NFC. I think exactly the 7 teams that deserve to be there are there. The teams that aren't. Like, you don't want to play any of these teams. And the fact is, going on the road in the playoffs in the NFL, it's always hard. So, do I expect what the Packers did last year to Dallas? That's unexpected. It's hard to predict that coming. That was a really big victory. Expecting something like that to come again, I don't think you can say that. But look, all the Packers need is a good run defense, Jalen Hurts to have a tough game, and he's had plenty this year, and Jordan Love to play like he was against the Lions, right, against the Seahawks. We're not talking about digging up some Jordan Love performance from months ago. Even if he plays like he did against the Vikings, or he plays as well as he did against the Saints, like Jordan Love has played mostly good football down the stretch here. I'm not willing to say this Bears game is anything more than an outlier for a team that, if it weren't for that, is otherwise coming off some pretty dominant victories and close games on the road against the best teams in the NFL.
Okay, would you echo that, Bass?
Yeah, when I look at, and this is so far away, week 1 in Brazil, like you see how that game started, and you mentioned, all Jalen Hurts has to do is have a bad game. I would argue that was a pretty bad game. He started with an interception. They had a fumble. He ended the game with 2 interceptions. The only difference was the Packers had 6 points off of the first 2 early turnovers, right? They need to execute on their offensive side. Their defense is actually very underrated. Everyone's acting like this Packers defense is not good. They don't have Jair. It doesn't matter, right? They're going to get smoked. No, this defense is actually pretty damn good. There's no respect to Keyshawn Nixon, who's been playing some good ball outside at cornerback. Carrington Valentine's been playing pretty well. Edgerrin Cooper's been playing out of his mind. And when you look at the run defense, the Packers week 1, Saquon ran pretty well. 24 carries, 109, 4.5 average, 2 touchdowns. I think not only, the Eagles have gotten better since that point, but the Packers' run defense has gotten way better since that point. They're second in the league in terms of yards per carry allowed at 4.0. So I think that is the recipe, for success there, is to try to contain, and I'm not going to say stop Saquon Barkley, because I don't think anyone can, but contain Saquon Barkley. And like I said earlier, hopefully get some of these pieces back with Evan Williams, Quay Walker, Rashawn Gary. And I think another big thing is having their veterans step up. And all their losses this year, the Packers' losses, you can point your finger at these veterans, your Kenny Clarks, your Rashawn Garys, even as Xavier McKinney as of late. They're playing poor in these losses. It's not all, okay, they have a rookie at that position, that's why we lost, right? They need to clean up their own mistakes, stop stepping on their own feet, and their veterans need to play better. If that all happens, which, I get, is a far stretch, right? Because we haven't seen it in the past few weeks. Last time we saw it was against New Orleans. It was like a seamless game, right? But if that all happens, like they have the skill, they have the talent, it just comes down to putting players in the right position and hopefully, calling a better game if you're Matt LaFleur than you have the last 2 weeks.
Might wind up even being similar to the Vikings and the Lions just last night, where, and I think this happened in the first matchup as well, where the Packers kind of let the game go earlier in the beginning when they had the opportunity. I remember I was flying out to Wisconsin actually that weekend. I'm watching the game in an airport, and after the Xavier McKinney interception, I was thinking, all right, here we go. Let it begin, the Jordan Love show in 2024. And they were just never able to really put their foot on the gas and take control of the game when they had the opportunity. And Philadelphia is one of those teams, especially now in their building, where if you guys get a turnover, got to finish the drive. And earlier in the year, the red zone was so troublesome for you. But then you turned it on the second half of the season. So playing that second half of the season Packer football is going to be vital. And one other thing, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I haven't looked at the percentages, but I felt like in that game, there were numerous times where Jalen Hurts, it would be like 2nd and 15 or 3rd and 8. Always seems to he gets out of the pocket and he'll either run for just enough to get it to 4th and inches where they can do the sneak, or he'll pick up that back-breaking first down. I think they had like a 10-minute drive that really ended the game. I just think that those third down plays there, getting off the field, much easier said than done when you have Saquon and A.J. Brown on the other side. But you're right. Everything is there for the Packers to have the opportunity. To me, it's going to come down to making those pivotal plays. There's like 6 or 7 plays that change games. Because it's not like the Eagles are superior in every single position group.
No, they're not. And that's a good point, saying, making those plays in those 6 to 7 times. I feel like in a lot of these Packers losses, it's the ball has bounced in the other team's favor in some of them. And like I said, don't get me wrong, the Packers definitely lost those games and the other team won those games. But there's a couple things that if they bounce the other way, right? If the Packers maybe get a little bit lucky, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, they say. They can maybe have some more wins. They wouldn't be 0-5 against good teams. Like I said, I understand fans' aspect looking at this. We've only lost to good teams, like all the teams with better records we haven't won against. But like I said earlier, 4.4 average point differential in all those games. To sit here and act like the Packers have zero chance, to me, is crazy.
Do you think there's a separation though from the Viking? And after last night, it feels a little weird putting the Vikings there. But do you think there's a separation between the Vikings, Lions, and Eagles and the Packers, or do you think that they're firmly in that group competing for the
as of
NFC?
right now, based off what we've seen? Yes, right. We've lost twice to the Lions. We've lost twice to the Vikings, albeit close games. We lost once to the Eagles, albeit a close game. But just based off of that, you guys have to be in your separate group. I want the Packers to prove me wrong, right? I think they're right outside of that right now. They're in that next tier of teams that are also in the playoffs.
You know what's funny, though, too, is we talk about those teams in the first group, and I'm putting the Vikings in there, maybe generously right now. Some people will probably disagree with that. But I think everyone would say not the Commanders, the Packers are the fourth team in the mix for the Super Bowl. I'd say I'd rank them probably ahead of the Commanders, Bucks, and maybe the Rams. We'll see about them. But it's funny that, these NFC North teams with all these wins, two of us are going on the road. Like, I'm putting the Vikings in the tier 1 group of Super Bowl contenders. We're going to probably have to go on the road for most of the playoffs. So, Ziggy, let me ask you, who do you think between the Vikings and the Packers is a bigger threat to come out of the NFC? Did the Sam Darnold game last night change your mind on us?
I mean, I'm not happy about that Sam Darnold game. And I think we'll talk about the Vikings more a little bit later. Yeah. So I'll have an opportunity to say that. That just seemed like a player not being ready for the biggest game of his career. And Jordan Love's played in more big games than Sam Darnold or whatever. But the thing that really worries me about this Packers team is they've got weapons. They've got threats. They've got guys who can generate those big plays. The difference is that for the Packers, it feels like it needs to come organically. Whereas the Vikings can often just make big plays happen. Like Justin Jefferson, incredible player. You can just find a way to get him the ball, right? Kevin O'Connell goes into the lab. He's the mad scientist, just finds a way to get this guy the ball, and it works. Justin Jefferson will always get you something. The equivalent sort of, I think, big play threat for the Packers, especially with Watson out, you really need a big game from Jayden Reed. And we've seen week in, week out since the beginning of the season. I mean, early on, he had a few big rushing attempts. Some of those early plays worked. But since then, the forced looks to Jayden Reed have been disastrous. Terrible. I mean, you could just see the last game, right? The rushing attempts are disastrous. The short plays are disastrous. He's a guy who can contribute huge on this offense, but it needs to come naturally from him stretching the field. He's not the sort of guy you can get the ball to quickly. So I think the fact that the Vikings have weapons that they can force the ball to gives them a huge advantage on offense. Both these defenses have had their ups and their downs and been good. But when you talk about a threat, when things are going well for the Packers, when they are playing organically, the reason I think they're sort of in a tier of their own between the top guys and the bottom 3 teams in the NFC, even though they're the 7th seed, I think that for the Packers, when it's coming, they can have those moments where they play as well as the best teams. You just can't count on it as consistently as you can for the Lions or the Eagles, or to a lesser extent, slightly the Vikings.
Yeah, you feel the same way about that, Bass? I think you're totally right, Ziggy.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there. With the Packers, they a lot of the times, it's inconsistency, can't get out of their own way type of thing, self-inflicted wounds. Like every game I can point to, and that again falls on consistency and being able to coach a good football game, whether it's drops or it's fumbles, turnovers, poor play calling, poor clock management, like last week against the Bears. I mean, I'm sure you guys saw it, like the field goal ish. I have no idea.
And the game,
I can't explain it.
Game should be over.
I've watched a lot of football in my life, and I don't think I've seen a situation like that in terms of clock management. So there's things like that. Like the Bears scored like 10 traditional points against our Packers defense, right? So we allowed the punt return touchdown, then also the fumble for Jayden Reed.
Yep.
That they started at the 20. Other than that, like 10 points, and the Bears barely moved the ball. They had like 3 yards per attempt. It was crazy. So like we pretty much essentially gave them that game just by how we ended that game, not only with the weird timeout before our field goal attempt that gave the Bears more time, but of course that prevent look that allowed the Bears to get in field goal range themselves. So again, there's a lot of inconsistencies there, and I think you're 100% correct.
I mean, you also saw like the team sounded pissed after that game as well, even though it wound up being like a meaningless game. Like Valentine's out there not taking shots, but a little bit athlete saying, "Hey, I'm just doing my job, man." And like I think Jayden Reed was very critical of himself with the fumble. But you're putting him in the backfield. Like, do we have to be doing that?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things that Packers fans and Packers players are like openly questioning. So that's one of those things where, hey, heading into Philly, obviously difficult place to play, really good team. I think you kind of you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, what kind of football team are we? And the Vikings had the same thing.
It might help that they got like
it could.
I don't like it. Honestly, we'll see. It could either really help them or really hurt them. They could implode. But that happening yesterday could help them going into this week more than a close Bears win would have. I don't know. It's one of those things. It depends with morality. It depends with momentum as well, and just getting hot at the right time. But as of the last 2 weeks, we've been very cold. So
sometimes you need to be smacked in the face. Ziggy and I, we're Notre Dame guys, so we're watching the Northern Illinois game earlier in the season, and as this year's gone on, you've heard Notre Dame people time and time again are like, after that game, we knew it was do or die. Like, we had to wake up, and I think the Vikings are in a similar spot where they clearly have some issues that need to be worked out. Sam Darnold is facing criticism that he hasn't had much of this season. So let me go over to the Vikings-Rams a bit. We'll move off the Packers' expertise for a second here. And now you can either gas up or put down our Vikings to whatever your discretion is here. We go into this Rams game, and it's pretty funny thinking back on October when we lost at the Lions, then lost to the Rams, back-to-back weeks. We're facing that exact same thing here. We have Stafford, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, everyone's healthy in LA. They rested everyone, which I thought was kind of an interesting decision to just say, we don't care about the 3 or 4 seed. Like, we'll take on the Lions or Vikings. I don't know if it's a confidence thing or just, hey, we've been hurt this whole season. Let's just make sure we're healthy for the playoffs. But going into this, the line opened with the Rams as favorites, and it's now flipped to the Vikings. After watching Sam Darnold and that performance last night, do you think that do we have the right to be as shaky as we are? We went on our show and we're like, all right, season looks like it's in turmoil here, or are we overreacting?
I feel like you might be thinking that because I don't think any Vikings fan thought they'd be in this position come playoff time, right? Like, I was half joking in the preseason. I'm like, everyone watch out for Sam Darnold. Like, this guy's going to prove us wrong, but he did. And last week was a very bad game. And a lot of people would say, well, the Lions played it perfectly. Sam Darnold also missed a lot of throws.
Thank you.
He was inaccurate on a lot of wide open wide receivers. I was watching the film and I'm like, because I was comparing it to the previous week. And I'm like, if that was against the Packers, he's hitting that, right? Multiple goal line instances where they have rub routes, whether it's a slant to an out underneath, and he's a guy wide open. He's wide open. And he doesn't either see it or he misses the throw. So I think, like you said, he just didn't play well in yesterday's game, but I'm still confident in Sam Darnold overall. I mean, it's not just like he played good in a few games this season. The majority of the season has been good games. I just think last week wasn't. I think he's one of the best at avoiding pressure and maintaining poise in the pocket. Sometimes people would argue he holds the ball too long, but that's to his benefit as well in certain instances. It just wasn't last night. But at the same time, man, I kind of agree with Vegas here that the line switched from one side to the other because it's kind of a toss-up for me. The Rams are playing some really good football. I think they won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight before, yesterday. They're resting their starters, and they're a really good football team. But where I'm kind of questioning them is their defense. They're 26th overall in defensive yards, 20th against the pass, and 22nd against the run. So I think if the Vikings can get back in rhythm, run the ball with Aaron Jones a little bit more, hopefully he can stay healthy and all that. And most importantly, man, is finishing the red zone. I'm sure you guys were hammering the table.
Oh my God. I mean, yeah.
Here's the thing. The Vikings had so many chances early to take a surmountable lead, honestly. Getting 2 easy interceptions on Goff, like they gave you opportunities. So I think the Vikings put themselves in great positions. It's just last night wasn't it. But I think they're definitely capable of hanging around and beating the Rams team. I think it's going to be a great game.
Yeah. Lions fans have been all over us for saying the Vikings were in that game in the first quarter. If a few things go differently, we're in a good spot. But I was actually sort of baffled by the decision to rest all the starters for the Rams, not because of the seeding. I think either way, whether you're 3 or the 4, you're in trouble. But while the Rams has won a bunch of their last games, you said they'd rattled off 5 straight wins after that Eagles loss. In their last 3 of the starters playing, the offense has been putrid. No touchdowns against the 49ers. Matthew Stafford threw for 110 yards against the Jets. They barely squeaked out a must-win game against the Cardinals. The offense has not played particularly well for them. Obviously, it's Matthew Stafford. They can get hot at any time, but they really struggled down the stretch in important games to get the offense going. They were fortunate to have a relatively easy schedule against the banged-up 49ers team, the Jets, whatever happened there, the Cardinals after the season sort of imploded. But the Vikings are a different challenge. This defense gets after you and gets after you really well. I know that they struggled against the Rams in October, but that was a while ago. The offense, when Sam Darnold's just not making uncharacteristic mistakes, can be very, very good. And look, you're traveling to LA to play the Rams. It's not going to be like Detroit where the crowd's loud, they're in your face. The Vikings have traveled very well this season, and the Rams, it's a free home game attendance-wise for any team that plays there. Obviously, it won't be like that when the Packers or the 49ers come and the Rams have had to go to the silent count.
It's crazy.
But I've never heard against the 49ers a few years ago, the Rams, they go to silent count in their own building in the playoffs. I've never heard of such a thing. Like the Vikings should be, it's a different situation. Obviously, the pressure of the game is bigger. But no, I think the Vikings are in a good spot here, and they should be favored. I think they should be expected to win.
Yeah, Bass, we were on a couple different preview shows for Vikings Lions, and people were asking us, hey, what's the biggest reason to not believe in this Vikings team? And I started answering it the first time saying, it's like it has to be Sam Darnold still. But I retracted it and said, that's unfair to Sam because he's been so good all year that to say, oh, I don't trust Sam Darnold. You're just saying that because he's Sam Darnold. Like that's the only reason you would say it heading into that Lions game. And I kind of found it funny that you said you went back and were watching the tape thinking, oh, against the Packers, he's hitting that throw. Because he was hitting those throws all season. And I don't know if it was the moment. I think people are entitled to having an off day. We went into Jacksonville and Sam was pretty bad, but the defense saved us because Mac Jones won't kill you. And it was just one of those days where they just didn't have it. Van Ginkel dropped the interception. There were the Will Reichard kicked the ball out of bounds right before the half. Like everything that could go wrong sort of went wrong, other than the 2 turnovers that we forced. So I kind of feel the same way where going into this one, it's all right. If Darnold shows up and plays anything like he was playing earlier or most of the season, I mean, I feel good. Yeah, it's always difficult against Stafford, but I feel like we should, if we win this game, we go back to Detroit, have another chance here. It was just, I thought it was disingenuous to Sam Darnold to say he's the reason we might lose because you hadn't seen it all year. So I still believe in him, and anyone who just wants to make fun of him, you could do it, but I don't think it's fair given the season he's had.
Yeah, I want to add one thing to that, and I think it's something that the Lions did really well, that I just don't know if the Rams will be able to, is they set the tone early with being very aggressive against your receivers and tight ends. Like watching the replays, I mean, hands all over them, bordering that line of, okay, we'll throw an illegal contact and then we'll eat that when you throw it. But the refs weren't most of the time. And that threw off Sam Darnold's timing like every single play. And you could see it because then he was kind of sitting going through his progressions, and these guys are being rerouted left and right, mainly, TJ Hawkinson and whatnot. And I think that really threw off the rhythm. And the Lions are great at doing that. They're a very, very, very physical football team. And I just don't see the Rams kind of replicating that. So I don't foresee a replication of what Sam Darnold was last week.
Campbell's so good at getting those guys up for games too. Like, oh my God, they're out there playing with. I mean, have you looked at their depth chart? Just like go on ESPN and look at the Lions depth chart. It's like half of it is IR. It's unbelievable to look at. And then you had Terry and Arnold leave the game, and it's so frustrating as a Viking fan watching last night because I'm just yelling at the TV like it's backups. Like we're playing a lot of backups. I know they got Anzalone back, but like you got to do something. This is a defense that people have been lighting up for 3 straight weeks. And we can't do anything, but they seem this year to just kind of have that feeling to them of like, hey, this is the Lions season. And
they're bought in.
A lot of times I've said when the Vikings have these great seasons of my life, there's always one team that's a little bit better. Like in 2009, it was the Saints. In 2017, it was the Eagles. And now it just seems like the Lions are that team that even though we have a lot of magic, the other team just has a little bit more. And I'm kind of getting this inevitable feeling about Detroit. Ziggy and I have been debating. He thinks the curse is broken, the Detroit curse. I'm like, it's not broken until they win the big game. Do you think, like, are you foreseeing a Lions Super Bowl run here?
Well, you're never gonna get an actual truthful answer out of me for that because I'm a biased Packer.
No, that's okay. I want the biased Packer fan answer.
I can't physically see it. I see Dan Campbell's aggressiveness, just like last year, biting them. I just see it happening at a certain point.
Ziggy won't favorable. Like this. Ziggy will not like this.
That's just how I feel. I really feel that way. That's maybe my Packers fan. I'm going, I don't want to see it, right? But again, they've never been to a Super Bowl. They never won a Super Bowl, right? Like, I don't know. I just want to see it to believe it. And I know we've seen it this regular season, but the playoffs are different than the regular season. So that's where I'm at right now. I don't want to see it.
Ziggy, what do you think of that?
We don't need to get into Dan Campbell stuff. I will say this, Paul, you said it earlier, momentum means a lot. And there's a reason the Lions are Super Bowl favorites, right? They've played lights out to close the season. And the fact that they get a bye now and guys get to start coming back, they can reverse the trend. Every week when we were previewing Lions games, I'd have to Google who's out this week, what new backup, what guy off the street is coming in. Now it's names I recognize that are coming back to play for them. And finishing your season by humiliating the Minnesota Vikings at home, shutting down one of the best offenses in the NFL, having your defense finally play well, having Jahmyr Gibbs set a team record for touchdowns in a game.
He's so good.
Being the 1 seed is such an advantage in the NFL because you're the only team that gets a bye in your conference. You get to host every playoff game that comes through. There's a reason why, since however many years ago, half the teams that are the 1 seed make it to the Super Bowl. It's so much easier to have that path, especially now that there's 7 teams and the 2 seed doesn't get that. I feel strange saying this. I don't understand how it can be. I look at my watch. I thought that hell would freeze over before it would be January and the Lions would be Super Bowl favorites. But if you're objective, if you take the nameplates off, if you don't look at the color of the uniforms, this is the best team in the NFL when half their defense is out. I definitely see the picture, but also, it's the Detroit Lions. The nameplates aren't off. They really do play at Ford Field. They really do wear Honolulu blue. And I see what you're seeing, boss. I can't not see this team implode when you've got teams like the Packers and the Eagles that have been there and done it before, entering into the playoff picture.
Yeah, I definitely respect that. I respect that take. It's just I can't do it.
It's the Detroit Lions.
I can't.
What am I supposed to do?
And it's also I have bias from being a Packers fan, right? You say, okay, being the first seed is so important and it's such an advantage. Well, it hasn't been for the Packers. And I've seen it be a disadvantage where the bye week, they come out super rusty or they have home field advantage and they have situations in the playoffs that they 100% should win. And we've had some horrible, heartbreaking losses in the past decade in the playoffs.
Down the rabbit hole we're going right now.
Oh yeah, it's a big rabbit hole for the Packers as of the last, decade or so. So that's probably my bias for that as well. Just seeing a number 1 seed, honestly, and this is truthful from me. I wouldn't want to be the 1 seed as a Packers fan. I just don't like it anymore. It has a weird mantra around it.
It's really funny. It's really funny you say that because half of the reason that our show started to gain a little bit of traction was that we were just Vikings fans complaining about the Packers last year. But it is funny when you look back over the past 10 years or so. The Packers have had probably more heartbreak than anyone. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are big Packers fans, and one of the things that really pisses me off about them is just how nice all Packers fans are. It's infuriating because you root against them, and then you're like, I kind of feel bad for that guy. Like he's just a good dude. And you guys have had a ton of heartbreak, and I don't really get where you're coming from when you say the 1 seed, but I understand that the PTSD is real for Packers fans. I will acknowledge that. So, all right, let's finish up here. Real quick, Bess, do you think the Lions are the best team in the NFC though? Because forget about going on the Super Bowl run. Okay, I just wanted to clarify there because I feel I
can't sit here and lie that much. Come on.
Okay, no. I was gonna say I feel like a lot for us too. Lions fans think that they thought last night, for example, that we were really disrespecting them, and I was saying no. They won the game. I mean, they're a great team. I just thought the Vikings gave it away in the first half, and Detroit then, as great teams do, was able to put their foot on the gas and not let the Vikings back into that football game. But yeah, okay, so we're all in alignment there that whether or not you believe on them to go on a Super Bowl run, the Lions probably have the best roster in the league right now. Any of the other teams, so we hit on the NFC North teams. We'll just finish up with the rest of the NFC teams right now. Out of the other group here, let's put aside Philadelphia. Between who we got? We got the Commanders, we got the Bucks, we got the Rams, right? Is there anyone I'm forgetting? That's it. Yep. Which of those 3 teams could you see one of them going on a little run to the NFC Championship game?
Oh man, I'm a big and there's not crazy stats behind this. I'm just a big Baker Mayfield guy, and I just feel like
Nice.
Oh, dude, I don't know. Something about the Buccaneers, like they're just kind of quietly there where no one's really talking about them, right? The Commanders, it's like, a new stardom under, Jayden Daniels and whatnot, and Dan Quinn, and they're doing great over there. But the Buccaneers, like Baker's been putting in all the work, like for a couple years now, revitalizing his career. Like I think they have some ball players over there, and I don't know. It's just for some reason I can't root against that guy, unless of course we play him. But I think they're just quietly sitting there. It could be one of those teams, even though they're a third seed. But again, I feel like a lot of the seeding's all backwards this year for the NFC. Like it's just a testament to how great the NFC is and how specifically the NFC North. But I think Tampa's that team. I'm kind of like, all right, like I could see that.
We just did a little clip on that exact same thing.
Really?
We kind of had the same feeling of like they're quietly like they beat the Lions. They beat they beat the Commanders earlier in the season. They beat the Eagles. They blew them out. Like they're quietly one of the more dangerous teams. And I think you could say for anyone, when they're on, they're dangerous. Like that's just how this NFC field is. But Tampa's been on against the good teams, and it's like, there's this weird, like I also can't root against them. Like they're very likable, and having that home game, like I can see it. And they were there last year. They were in the divisional round last year. People seem to forget that as well. And that played a really good game against Detroit. So I'm kind of with you on Tampa. Are you, Ziggy? Would that be your pick of those three teams?
I hate to say this because the Minnesota Vikings are playing them next week. But if there were one of those three teams that I could see making a run, I think it has to be the Rams. Baker Mayfield, great player. He plays good football. But Matthew Stafford, you talk about guys who have been there and done that before. He's won a Super Bowl. And we've seen when this Rams offense is on, you've got Puka Nacua, you've got Cooper Kupp, you've got Kyron Williams. Like this Rams offense is explosive. Everybody knows that. The thing that's really changed my mind on this Rams team, and the thing that has me eyeing them as a team that could potentially be a difference maker in the playoffs, there have been so many revelations for them on defense this year from young guys. You've got Quentin Lake, who's one of the three defensive Ironmen in the NFL, played every single defensive snap. Braden Fisk has been a huge breakout player this year. Gerard Verse has played really excellently for this team this year. There's so many young guys on this Rams defense that I think just haven't gotten enough credit for how they've played. If you combine a great offense with young defensive playmakers, that's a formula that we've seen make it to the Super Bowl before. And they get the advantage of playing the Minnesota Vikings in the first round, who are coming off one of the most disappointing games in franchise history. So you got to be happy playing the Vikings in the playoffs, I think, if you're talking about generational curses. The most Vikings thing ever. We said this a few weeks ago. Lose this Lions game, get bounced in the wild card round, and just that's your season. You got so excited. You got your hopes up. You can feel great about the season that month, but you lose in the first round. I think this Rams team could really do something. The experience, the coaching, all the breakout players, the offense. I don't think they will. I think the offense isn't going to click, but betting against Matthew Stafford in the playoffs has burned a lot of folks.
I want to ask you, because I'm sure you've been talking about it a lot, or both of you, but for that matter, if the Vikings do get bounced in the first round, and it's not like, Sam Darnold had another game like last week, but he had a decent enough game for you guys to win. What's your future outlook on him? Like, I'm sure you've talked about this so much, but what's your actual future outlook on Sam Darnold?
Man, yeah, we have talked about that an unbelievable amount, and I've thought about it more than we've talked about it. So I would say, like, I actually think yesterday did hurt him quite a bit, at least in terms of those negotiations. And the Rams game, like if he goes out and flops, I don't know what's going to happen. But let's say he plays well, we just lose, kind of the way we did earlier in the season on Thursday Night Football. It's hard not to bring him back. 14 wins, like 14 wins is a crazy season. Like those are some of those memorable seasons you'll have as a fan. But I can't give him $50 million. Like I just can't give him one of those crazy deals where Tua, that looks bad. Trevor Lawrence, that looks bad. Kirk Cousins had his, $45 million. That looks bad. I think the quarterback market has gotten out of control. I know people are saying it's just going to get worse, but at some point, we made that decision with Cousins, and that's why we're here, because we were able to use all that money, that Kirk money, on building the defense. I don't know exactly the deal I'd give him right now. Ziggy, you said, what was your deal, Ziggy? Like $40 million a year for 3 years, and you have an out after 2?
My projection before the game was that he gets something like 20% more than the Baker Mayfield deal. So 3 years, $120 million, out after year 2 for the team pretty easily. But sorry, go.
No, you were talking. Go.
I was going to say, I think that the worse Sam Darnold plays next week, the better the chances are he comes back to the Vikings. And that might sound sort of strange, right? Why is your quarterback having a really crummy end of the season good for you? The Vikings would love to bring Sam Darnold back, I think. Like you said, Paul, 14 regular season wins. But the way this roster is constructed, this is a roster that's designed to transition to a cheap rookie quarterback. They've signed big extensions to a lot of young guys. They've got plenty of big extensions, especially on the offensive line coming up. Deals like that Justin Jefferson deal are going to kick in sooner rather than later. They can't afford to hand Sam Darnold a league leading or one of those giant quarterback contracts, $50 million plus a year. And I don't think they want to. If Sam Darnold takes the Vikings to the Super Bowl, some team in free agency, whether it's the Giants or whoever, is going to be willing for the publicity to sign Sam Darnold to that giant deal. Some GM that's trying to save his job will make that the splash move. But if Sam Darnold doesn't play well, right, if he has 2 bad weeks, nobody's saving their job by signing Sam Darnold to a massive deal. It would make a lot more sense for him to come back to the Vikings, be the transitional guy for JJ McCarthy, put together another great season, and try again. So how Sam Darnold does in the playoffs, I think the better he plays, the less likely he is to return. Jeez. Right now, I see him coming back on a transitional deal, and JJ McCarthy's the guy by the end of next year.
So what about a franchise tag? It's projected at $41 million, kind of right around your mark there.
I know people have been bringing that up.
If Sam Darnold plays well enough that we're going to franchise tag him, he's not playing on the franchise tag.
You don't think so?
There are plenty of guys where you franchise tag them and they have to eat it. If Sam Darnold goes on a playoff run and the Vikings think the only way to keep him around is to franchise tag him, he'll hold out. Because if you're Sam Darnold and the Vikings are taking away that payday from you, he's had a great season. But there is no guarantee that Sam Darnold, it's actually extremely improbable that if he starts with the Vikings all of next year, he wins this many games. This is sort of a magical season. If you have a chance to cash in as Sam Darnold, now has to be the time to do it. I think if the Vikings franchise tag him, you're ruining all of those good vibes. And if that's really the only way to keep him around, he's going to hold out. Maybe we tag and trade him. I don't know. The Vikings sure need draft picks, even with that Kirk Cousins compensatory pick coming in. So that's an option, but I can't see him sticking around and playing on the franchise tag next year.
People are also talking about us signing Darnold and trading McCarthy. I don't know if you've seen those. Like, there's so many Vikings rumors of trading McCarthy. I mean, O'Connell being traded. I think, was it Jake Glazer who reported that yesterday? It was like he had to have had a futures bet on the Lions and was trying to have some sort of turmoil in the locker room. But like, I can't, I would not, obviously I wouldn't trade McCarthy unless it was a huge deal back. Like, everyone wants to be the Packers. I've said this a few times. Everyone wants to be the Packers with this, Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, let them rest until they have the opportunity to actually be like the Packers and let their guys sit and learn behind someone. So like, no, obviously I wouldn't trade JJ. Like if we could bring back Darnold for a couple of years and he proves it, great. He'll get his mega deal. If Sam Darnold is worth a mega deal in 2 more years, it's probably, the Vikings have probably had a few good seasons. And if he comes out and regresses, then you have JJ in the wings who's been studying for 3 straight years. Like, I think they're in a great position just as long as they don't sell the farm to keep Darnold around. But we'll see what happens. I mean, with the Vikings, we'll find some way to lose them both. Something will happen.
Well, but let's not forget, right? It's easy to sit back and say, like, JJ McCarthy's going to come and he's going to be the guy. He was the 5th quarterback taken in his draft class, and he's coming off substantial reconstructive knee surgery. Yeah. Like, there's a very good chance that JJ McCarthy never plays as well as Sam Darnold played this season, at least this regular season. Like, that's a pretty high ceiling. Talk about a guy winning 14 games, playing a substantial part on one of the best offenses in the NFL. So if there's any way to keep Sam Darnold where we can afford it, and even though you've got those big deals coming in, I mean, the Vikings are projected to have $75 million in cap space next year, $100 million in 2026. Like, there's ways to move that around and make that work. That's even with Justin Jefferson taking up $40 million against the cap, Brian O'Neill taking up $25 million against the cap. Like, it can be done. I'm not in a rush to send Sam Darnold off to the rotten pastures of the New York Giants or the Oakland Raiders or whatever and watch him suffer. If he can play well for us, shoot, JJ McCarthy never has to play a snap if we keep winning 14 games a season.
Yeah, I'd sign up for that. So Bass, thanks a lot for coming on, man. We appreciate it. We kept you a little longer than we said we would, but you had a great question there at the end that Ziggy and I can clearly go on for days about Sam Darnold. So why don't you give everyone a shout out to where they can find your work?
Yeah, it's at Basaraski Productions on YouTube or Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Every day of the week, Packers content, and hopefully making some more after this week after winning the playoffs.
Basaraski Productions. There it is. There it is. We come full circle. Got the pronunciation there. And you know what? The most Packer thing in the world, the most NFC North thing in the world would be for the Vikings to blow their 14-win season in LA, Packers to upset the Eagles, and then go into Detroit and end the magical year of the Lions. So it's all there in front of you guys as Packers fans to have the great ending.
It's a fan fiction. That's a fan fiction.
That's a movie. That's a Jordan Love movie that'll come out summer of 2026. So we appreciate you coming on, man, and good luck this weekend. We're actually rooting for your Packers to take down the Eagles. So appreciate
you're rooting for the Packers.
Yeah, I am.
Don't rope me into that, man. I'm a Vikings fan.
I'm not hard blood,
but I'm not rooting for the Packers. What does that even mean? You're rooting for the Packers.
Yeah, I'm gonna get exiled by Vikings fans here.
Probably. I'm not rooting for the Vikings. I'm not going to say that. I'm not.
All right. Good luck, guys, and
really appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. We'll be back with more content later this week as we head into the playoffs. I mean, God willing, we got to win this game.